Hello and welcome. Sound Off Sports. Mike Davis here in the den at Fox 5 Studios. Great show today. We're breaking down all the news about Aaron Rodgers. Where should he play this season? And Kevin Kruger is out, but Josh Pastner is in. Can he get the Runnin Rebels back to dominance? All that and so much more coming up right now on Sound Off Sports.
Make some noise. This is Sound Off Sports, sponsored by Sam and Ash.
Can Josh Pastner get the Runnin Rebels back to prominence? At UNLV Rebel Rat on X says, national prominence? LOL, let's just win this diminished Mountain West.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sound Off Sports. I'm your host, Mike Davis, joined by my main man, James Edward Barrickman, the fourth. Big week here in Las Vegas.
Super big week.
Runnin Rebels have found their new head coach in Josh Pastner, a guy I'm very excited about.
Oh, I know you are.
I was talking very highly about this guy on Sin City Beat. He's got a very interesting history. Listen, this is a program that needs to get back to dominance. Was Kevin Kruger a good guy? Do we love Kevin? Do we love his father, Lon? 100%. But now this team, this program needs to deal with a shifting landscape in college athletics when it comes to recruiting, NIL, charisma. We need a different energy. We need a different juice, and I think this is a guy who has won in the ACC. He's won with Memphis. He's won with Georgia Tech.
Has he won in the ACC?
I mean, he was ACC Coach of the Year.
He won a year or two.
You know, he had a couple years where he was ACC Coach of the Year. When you shift to a conference like the Mountain West that's weak, not seen as strong in the eyes of the committee of the NCAA, and now it's about to get weaker, this guy is going to have to find success in a conference like the Mountain West. And we're going to get back to getting into the regularity of being in March Madness, being in the tournament, winning Mountain West titles, and then we'll see if we can string along some games in the tournament.
So you're saying Barry Odom style reclamation project here at UNLV, where Barry Odom went from the SEC down to the Mountain West, handled the lesser competition here in the Mountain West, and you're thinking it's going to be the same thing with Josh Pastner?
That's what I think. And I think we had a couple of different ways we could go. You could have gotten a guy who's never been proven, never been a head coach, and now he's getting his first crack at a job where it's an upward move for this guy, but he really hasn't proved anything, and it would be, we'd see what would happen. We wouldn't know what kind of relationships he has within the business. He would just be making a jump. Or we could have gotten a guy who's maybe over the hill and not fluid with NIL and all those types of things. So I think this is a guy who's actually proven some good stuff. We've heard great remarks from Jay Wright, Coach K, Coach K, Jay Wright, Coach Calipari. So, I mean, this is a guy who really has that basketball pedigree. For everybody at home, he was a walk-on at University of Arizona Wildcats, won a championship there.
Yep.
Then he was a grad assistant under Lute Olson, his head coach. He goes to see Calipari as an assistant, spends time there in Memphis. Calipari leaves Memphis, goes to Kentucky. Pastner ends up becoming the head coach, does some good things there, perhaps underachieves to a degree. Then he gets a job at Georgia Tech and competes pretty well in an ACC, in an ACC conference that's not so easy, especially during that time. So I like the move. I think this is, he said a lot of great things at his presser, James. You know me, I'm a big presser guy.
You're like a feel guy. You're not so much a resume guy as you are like a feel guy.
I appreciate the resume, but I like the feel. The guy's excited. He says he wants to be here for 30 years. This is a dream job. He says it's a sleeping giant of a job. He respects the history. I do
agree with that. This is a sleeping giant athletic program.
Yeah.
Between football, basketball, everything. And I'm glad he said that. This just, to me, the hire doesn't excite me. This isn't like a splash hire that I think a sleeping giant program like UNLV basketball needs or deserves. I think they could have done better.
Who do you think?
I was really hoping for like an Eric Olin
right
at UC San Diego. I don't know how realistic of an option that was, but that was kind of who I was hoping for UNLV.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating situation because, I mean, even even a guy like Patino, who was considering Villanova and then went to Xavier. In a lot of ways, I think UNLV is a better job than Xavier in terms of history and all those types of things.
It could be. Now, it's probably not, but it could be, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm pumped about the hire. I think this is a guy who's going to relish in the opportunity, the history. He was even just saying, like, putting on that UNLV scarlet and gray for the first time, you know, putting on those colors.
Legendary. It's legendary.
Yeah, he said that the hairs on the back of his neck were standing up, and that's how exciting he was. And this is just a guy who's lived and breathed basketball for so long. At 13, he had a scouting service he put on. I read somewhere that he applied for the Los Angeles Clippers job at age 19, James.
Is that legit?
I'm pretty sure. Like, I think it was just like a goof, but he may have not been goofing. I even read somewhere that the dude doesn't even drink coffee, soda. He doesn't really curse a lot. So
I need my head coach to curse. We've been talking about this.
We need
our head coach.
We're like a Bobby and Danny Hurley kind of guy.
Right.
We like the Hurley family tree. Like, people just screaming at us. But I'm excited about this. Do you think, what's the biggest obstacle? And what do you think? I want to pose a question to you that we asked on Sin City Beat. What do you think what would be success? What would define success for Pastner early on?
I think it's a tournament appearance in year 2 or 3, you know? I think in this era of college basketball and college athletics, where you are turning over rosters year after year, I think it's easy, and you have a guy who's, and Pastner's known as a guy who can recruit well. I mean, you saw him in his press conference. The energy is palpable. I think if you're UNLV, a tournament appearance in year 2 or 3 isn't unrealistic at all.
All right. I love to hear it. I'm hoping for that year 1 March Madness appearance. Guys, coming up after a short break, opening day is here. We're talking to an author who's celebrating the magic of baseball, the special qualities of fatherhood, and so much more. Coming up, we're talking with author Jeff Benjamin.
Can Josh Pastner get the Runnin Rebels back to prominence? Owen Lee Green on Facebook says, only if he brings back the Tark-style run and gun.
All right, guys, welcome back to Sound Off Sports. Mike Davis here. I am joined with a guy who's a maven in the restaurant space, a restaurateur, but he's also a published author, and it's not his first go-around. He has a new sports book out called Extra Innings, a memoir of fathers, sons, fandom, and fate. But his first book was all about the restaurant business. It's the great Jeff Benjamin. He, you know him if you're out here in Las Vegas. He's a legend in Philadelphia, but in Vegas, Vetri Cucina at the Palms, you know, Fiorella at Durango, Asteria at Red Rock Resort. So any of those places you've been, it's because of this guy right here and his great partner, Mark Vetri. But we're here with Jeff Benjamin. Jeff, you got the all the Cubs gear on. You got the Ernie Banks in the background, the Wrigley stuff. Tell us, how does it feel? Extra Innings. The book is finally here. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah, it has been. It's been a labor of love. You know, we think about doing things like this every once in a while. I think all of us have our thing that we want to do. Oh, if I ever have the time, this is what I'm going to do. And I think I mentioned this to you the day I met you. This was years ago. Hey, I've got this plan to write this book, and I think you probably left that conversation like that guy's full of it. But I have a tremendous love of my Chicago Cubs, and anyone who's a Cub fan probably feels that way. And a lot of things happened. The loss of my father over 2 decades ago, who never got to see them play in the World Series, taking my kids to the World Series. As you said, Mark and I started a business in 1998, and my first child was born in 2003, and during that time, all we did was work. So I started to miss a lot of things and realized I didn't want that to be my legacy. So the goal in life is to spend extra innings with your children or with your family or any loved one. And so I decided to write a book about always praying for extra innings in anything you do.
Well, let's talk about this and dig deep in. And I want to, get into your whole story, but I didn't think you were full of it at all, because I'll tell you exactly why. Because you had in your wallet the actual ticket from the game that you went with your father, and you still have it in pristine condition in your wallet, and you showed me a PDF, and you're actually working on the book. So a lot of it had already been written, but now it's actually published. You can go on Amazon, you can get it in paperback. It's a beautiful thing. But let's talk a little bit, because there's a lot of similarities here. I think to get a book published, to be in the restaurant space, you know what it takes to be a grinder and to get things done. But I think the emotional component to the story is really sweet. So let's start there. So Extra Innings, it's a fascinating thing. My producer, he worked in Ottumwa, Iowa, actually.
Oh, there you go.
You're a Davenport, Iowa guy.
You know who else is from Ottumwa, Iowa?
Who's from Ottumwa?
Radar O'Reilly from MASH.
Oh, okay. See, my producer's nodding right now. And my producer's way too young to even know what MASH is. But I will say this. It's a special story because your father, and we don't have so much time, but your father was, a rabbi, and he was practicing in Davenport, Iowa, and he was a social justice kind of warrior guy, and he actually lost his job. And it's crazy that I'm even saying this on an interview with a guy as young as you are, but there was a lot of civil rights issues going on at that time, and he stood up for African-American students, lost his job, and had to get transferred to Long Island, New York. But all in this time growing up in the Midwest, I'm sure you became a fan of the Cubs. So paint us a little bit of a picture of the type of man your dad was, and it was hard to connect with people of that generation. So baseball was your connection.
100%. I think you hit the nail on the head. My father, he was, I always say he was the greatest father I'll ever have, right? But we're all flawed human beings, and one of the things that he dove headfirst into his job. He loved being a rabbi. He loved ministering to people of all faiths. And because he was a rabbi in Davenport, Iowa, he ministered to people with about a 75-mile radius and spent a lot of time in interfaith relationships. So he ended up becoming the chairman of the Civil Rights Commission in Davenport. And it's hard for me to even fathom, in my lifetime that there was racial injustice. And look, there still is racial injustice.
Yes, of course.
That said, such overt and such systemic within a school district that there was a need for someone like my father to speak up, and I'm glad he did, because it taught me and my sisters quite a bit.
All right, thank you so much to Jeff Benjamin. Make sure you go check out that book, Extra Innings. For the full conversation, for the full interview, go to our YouTube page, Silver State Sports.
Where should Aaron Rodgers decide to play next season? Thomas Robert Means on Facebook says, there's only one team that needs a quarterback, and that's Pittsburgh, because Russell Wilson just signed with New York Giants.
All right, welcome back to SOS. So we asked everybody at home, where should Aaron Rodgers, the future Hall of Famer, 41 years old, where should he play this season in the NFL? James, a good amount of responses we got.
People love talk about Aaron Rodgers.
I mean, he's a controversial dude.
Very controversial.
He's dramatic. It's fascinating because, a lot of people thought he was going to make a decision during free agency. Yeah. I believe that he was always looking towards Kevin O'Connell and the Minnesota Vikings, and they just don't want him. They want to roll with last year's, draft pick, J.J. McCarthy. So now the teams that need a quarterback are starting to fall.
It's Pittsburgh.
Is it? And you're a Yinzer. That's your team.
I think from a Steelers fan perspective, I want the Steelers to just kind of roll with Mason Rudolph. We need a 4-win season, a 5-win season to kind of reset this whole thing. But internally, within the facility down there in the south side of Pittsburgh, they don't think so. They still think they have a window, and that's why they went and got DK Metcalf. So now that you did make the move for DK Metcalf, you have to go get a quarterback. You basically, if you're Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin, you have to get Aaron Rodgers. Otherwise, it was kind of a waste going after DK Metcalf.
The problem is that it's a copycat league. And I think guys like, our dude, Colin Cowherd mentioned this, and I think it's very smart. It's like, last year, Kirk Cousins was making decisions preemptive to the NFL draft, preemptively. Right. Whereas I think Aaron Rodgers is a little smarter. He didn't like the whole New York Jets experiment. So now it's like he's going to maybe watch and wait to see where the dominoes fall for this NFL draft. And, the Giants now have Jameis Winston, DeVito, and Russell Wilson.
The most electric QB room in the league.
So what's going on there? That maybe even signals that they're not even going to draft a quarterback at 3. Cam Ward could go 1. Shedeur could go 2 to Cleveland, or Shedeur could fall. I mean, I could see Pittsburgh trying to trade up to get Shedeur.
The mock drafts that have Shedeur dropping into like the 20s, I don't see that happening, but as a Steelers fan, if Shedeur dropped that far, I would love.
But the teams that need a quarterback aren't that. I mean, it's like the Saints, maybe. They still have Derek Carr, but they could go for a quarterback. The Steelers, the Giants, the Browns, and the Titans, and the Browns and the Titans might take 1 and 2.
And there's rumors that the Browns are wanting Dak Prescott. They're looking to make a trade for Dak. It's just the whole thing's a mess.
It's a crazy thing. It's just the haves and the have-nots. James, let's do this. We asked people at home, where should Aaron Rodgers play this season? Let's hear what someone at home had to say.
Aaron should be signed to the Vegas Raiders. Listen, they need a quarterback. Vegas needs some help. So I want to say, why not?
All right, I appreciate that call, but it's not going to happen. I mean,
Geno Smith is,
Geno Smith's the guy. I don't even know if Shedeur's going to happen anymore if he fell to 6.
It should happen if he falls to 6. I would hope they'd be smart enough to pick up.
It looks. I'm seeing a lot more Genty, and
that's so dumb to me.
You don't like running back in the top 10.
No, I like running back in the top 10 if it's a Saquon Barkley. If it's even a Bijan Robinson. I don't think Ashton Genty's either of those guys.
A lot of people have him as like one of the...
And I like Ashton Genty. I think he's a first-round guy. I don't think he's top 10. I think he's outside of the top 50.
You saw him play in person. Listen,
he's good.
He's going to be good. He's going to definitely be a difference maker in the NFL. Here's my question for you, James. This is what I'm curious about. Aaron Rodgers, do you really think he just ends up retiring? Is there even a chance? A lot of people are talking about maybe the Purdy contract has some problems and they don't want to pay 55, 60 mil for Purdy, and maybe Aaron Rodgers swoops into the Kyle Shanahan, win now team, and maybe that would be a good situation.
I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to retire. I think he likes being in the spotlight way too much. He loves the dramatics. He loves being the center of attention, right? So if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I probably am holding off on signing with Pittsburgh because I think that's probably my last resort. I am looking at Minnesota and I'm looking at San Francisco because let's start with San Fran. If you're Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch and you can get 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers for cheaper than you can sign Brock Purdy, what are we even talking about? That roster has kind of been decimated,
right?
Just this free agency period, so they're not in so much of a win now as they were the past 2 or 3 seasons. But if you can get a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers in a system of Kyle Shanahan, I will take that 100 times out of 100 for them over signing a more expensive Brock Purdy.
I mean, those are win now rosters, and if Rodgers is still at a good enough level where I think he can throw the ball, is his mobility limited? Does he, look a little bit more shaky when he's taking hits and stuff? 100%. But going to a team like those where there's offensive line play, there's weapons, there's defense, it's a win-now team, you never know what could happen.
Moral of the story, real quick before we go to break, I just think if you're Aaron Rodgers, you have 2 great offensive minds, Kyle Shanahan, Kevin O'Connell. I would take those guys a million times over before going to a team like Pittsburgh that has no idea what they're doing.
I just don't think, I think he would retire rather than go to another situation.
Maybe.
I don't think he's going to go just hang out at another New York Jets concept. But guys, coming up after a short break, it's time for Sink or Swim.
Where should Aaron Rodgers decide to play next season? Jamie Principe on Facebook says, dude, retire already. You're a has-been way past your prime. Nobody wants you.
All right, Sink or Swim time here. Sound Off Sports, Mike Davis, James Edward Barrickman the fourth. James, it's a conversation percolating throughout social media right now. The whole debate whether name, image, and likeness, whether the transfer portal, things of that nature, whether it has ruined, killed the Cinderella, killed March Madness and all that fanfare. It's something that's been percolating. I don't know exactly how I feel about it. Yesterday, Sin City beat Case Kiefer had a really good point from the Las Vegas Sun. He was saying, the sample size is limited.
He thinks it's a one-off.
Potentially, and I don't know how
I agree.
What do you think? Is the Cinderella dead in March Madness?
I think when you listen to what our guy Wyatt Tomchek said in response, he's totally right. These mid-major programs, these kids, as soon as they're averaging a decent clip down there, they're hitting the portal and getting paid at one of these P4, one of these power conferences.
We saw a guy on Michigan who's in the Sweet 16 entered the portal while in the tournament.
Right, that Florida Atlantic team that made the Final Four, like 3 of their guys are on Sweet 16 teams that aren't in the Final Four.
So you're saying
that aren't Florida Atlantic.
You're saying the reason for the loss, this absence of the Cinderella in March Madness, it's more so about the transfer portal, less so about NIL.
I think it's the opportunity to get paid with a bigger program, and so as soon as they're like, hey, I have an opportunity to get paid here, I'm leaving, McNeese, and I'm going to go try and play at Arizona. And these teams that we used to see where these guys were playing together for 2, 3, 4 seasons that could knock off a big Power 4 team first, second round of the tournament, we're not going to see that anymore because those guys that would have stayed there, they're jumping ship at the first opportunity to go to a bigger program.
And I do agree with that. I think that NIL stuff is perfectly fine. That's here to stay. I love that Oracon's even getting it. The McNeese
I'm glad dudes are getting paid.
I like that. The problem is going to be the portal. And I think the portal in the future, there will be more restrictions on how players can transfer in and out of programs. Guys, thanks so much for joining us here on Sound Off Sports. We'll see you next time. Make sure to always check our website and call in to hear your great responses. We'll see you next time. Mike Davis, James Everett Barrickman IV. Thank you.